6 p.m. on a Wednesday here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Here are the headliners for this newscast. To ensure Korean companies can focus on developing innovative products and creating new markets, the government plans to ease regulations on potential growth engines and invest more money in those sectors. The United States deploys more strategic weapons to South Korea to demonstrate the strength of the bilateral alliance, the latest in the line of hardware to arrive here, F-22 stealth fighters. The Korean won drops to its lowest level in more than 5 years against the greenback on Wednesday, raising calls for the central bank to cut interest rates. We begin at the nation's top office, where the government has announced plans to spur domestic demand and support future growth engines through deregulation in the face of the growing uncertainties for the Korean economy. These include the threats from North Korea, of course, and fluctuations in the global financial markets. Our Song Ji-sun starts us off.
Nothing should stand in the way of companies seeking to develop innovative products and new markets, so the government will do its best to relax regulations on potential growth engines. That's what President Park Geun-hye said Wednesday at the first investment promotion meeting of the year. She also said it's important to strengthen the country's economic fundamentals by boosting domestic demand, so that the country's growth isn't held up by falling exports due to slowing global demand. Seoul will also remove as many regulations as possible, except for those deemed essential, to foster new growth engines that can also create quality jobs in various sectors. One of the sectors is sports, expected to grow into a $40 billion market by next year. That's a 20% rise from 2014 and double the size of Seoul's tourism industry. To expand facilities investment in the sector, the government will allow new gyms to be built in areas designated as greenbelts. Seoul will also allow domestic colleges to build branches overseas to help them export their education services. President Park added that the administration would devise regulations for groundbreaking products like drones and unmanned vehicles after the goods are introduced, as doing otherwise could prevent companies from gaining a foothold in the market during the initial stage of development. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
And in a bid to kickstart the country's dull recovery momentum, Korea has laid out a set of new measures to prop up the economy, this time through investment. The government aims to foster new growth engines in the service sector while cutting red tape to breathe life into a number of key projects. Hwang Jie tells us more.
Uber, Airbnb, and TaskRabbit. These are just 3 examples of the so-called sharing economy that's much larger than some might think. Hundreds of millions of people worldwide are now paid for the work they do within these systems, whether that's by driving an Uber cab or doing small jobs for others through websites like TaskRabbit. The global market size has jumped over 10 times in just 4 years. And to foster this industry, Korea is all geared up to strip back regulations. During a meeting to promote investment led by President Park Geun-hye on Wednesday, the government pledged to cut red tape in not just the sharing economy sector, but also in sports, healthcare, and education, some new service industries that are seen as hopeful candidates for the country's next growth engine. The government also plans to rev up the agriculture sector by supporting farmers to come up with premium fresh produce so they can take advantage of the free trade deal with China and export their goods to the world's second largest market. On top of that, by immediately pushing ahead with investment projects currently stalled due to regulations, the government expects to see a lift of around $5 billion in investment. All this comes as Korea struggles with local companies that have been losing their appetite for aggressive investment in times of slowing global demand. With exports plunging by the biggest margin last month in nearly 6.5 years, and the outlook for all of this year not looking so bright either, job creation is dulling. The youth unemployment rate hit its highest level in 7 months in January, hitting 9.5%, inching up 0.3 percentage points from the same month a year ago. The overall jobless rate was at 3.7%. So while the growth last year mainly came from domestic demand on the back of measures to boost consumption, the government is now hoping to get the corporate sector moving again with the new package that it projects will shake loose around $40 billion worth of investment and create more jobs. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Let's focus on national defense right now. 4 U.S. stealth fighter jets have just completed a flyover of South Korea in yet another show of force against North Korea following its recent provocations. Kim Hyun-bin has the details from Seoul's defense ministry. Hyun-bin, it looks like we are finally speaking North Korea's language.
That's right, Daniel. The 4 jets that flew over Osan Air Base a little south of Seoul at noon today are F-22 Raptors, and they are seriously powerful pieces of military hardware, and that they were escorted by 4 South Korean F-15s and 4 U.S. F-16s. And the F-22s were escorted. The F-22s were dispatched from the U.S. Air Base in Okinawa this morning as part of a provisional deployment aimed at pressuring North Korea. Now, South Korean military officials says 2 F-22s will be temporarily stationed at the Osan Air Base.
This mission demonstrates the strength of the alliance between the United States and the Republic of Korea and the resolve of both nations to maintain stability on the Korean Peninsula.
The F-22 is a key part of Washington's key strategic weaponry and considered one of the best fighter jets in the world. They're equipped with full stealth capabilities as well. Now, this means they could infiltrate North Korean airspace undetected and destroy the regime's key nuclear and missile infrastructure before the North knew what hit them. Now, their range also allows them to target anywhere in North Korea when flown from the south. The F-22s are not the first strategic U.S. weapons deployment here in recent weeks. The U.S. flew a B-52 bomber over the peninsula last month, plus the nuclear-powered submarine USS North Carolina docked in Korea's southern city of Busan on Tuesday. A nuclear-powered carrier USS John C. Stennis is also scheduled to take part in the annual South Korea-U.S. defensive drills, Key Resolve and Full Eagle, which start earlier next month. We also hear word B-2 stealth bombers could also fly over in the coming weeks. So all the big guns of the U.S. Air Force and Navy have or will make an appearance over South Korea in a show of force the Allies hope will make North Korea think twice before carrying out another provocation. Back to you.
All right, thank you for that, Hyun-bin. Moving on, the UN Security Council could impose an unprecedented sanctions on North Korea as early as next week, according to Seoul's ambassador to the UN. Council members have been hard at work drafting a new resolution against the communist state ever since its 4th nuclear test more than a month ago. Our Kwon So-hwa has this report.
What's already taking longer than the process of drafting previous resolutions on North Korea appears to be in the final stages. In an interview with Seoul-based news channel YTN, South Korea's ambassador to the United Nations Oh Jun said there is a chance a new UN Security Council resolution on North Korea could be adopted as early as next week. Ambassador Oh says he is expecting stronger sanctions than in existing resolutions once the U.S. and China complete their final mediations on the draft. That's been so far the main obstacle to a swift agreement on the matter, but Chinese sources and media outlets suggest that Pyongyang's closest ally has become a more active participant in the UN talks ever since the North's long-range missile test, which came a month after its nuclear test in January. One expert said Beijing probably won't give a green light to all of Washington's proposals, but that there could be some room for negotiation.
If the decision on the strong measures suggested by the U.S., such as a secondary boycott or sanctions on trade or exchanges of human resources, is left for related countries to decide on independently, China could uphold its pattern of consideration for its ally and not accept Washington's view 100%.
Backing up the prospects for a swift adoption of the resolution, an official at Seoul's foreign ministry told reporters after Tuesday's high-level talks between South Korea and China in Seoul that Beijing saw eye to eye with South Korea on sanctions that would hurt North Korea. The official added that the bilateral talks made up a much larger portion of the meeting in Seoul than the possible deployment of the U.S. missile defense system THAAD in South Korea, to which China objects, and that the Chinese side briefed Seoul in detail on the current progress at the UN headquarters. Kwon So-hwa, Arirang News.
We're now learning that North Korea has the capability to conduct nuclear tests without exhibiting any signs of test preparations. U.S.-based North Korea monitoring site 38 North says the North appears to have altered its test preparation practices in order to make them more difficult to detect, as demonstrated by its fourth nuclear test last month. The site says previous images suggest Pyongyang may already have finished digging several underground tunnels at its main nuclear test site in Punggye-ri, which would allow them to conduct another test with little or no warning. And in an address to the National Assembly, the floor leader of the main opposition Minju Party has vowed to reopen the Inter-Korean Factory Park in the North Korean border city of Kaesong that was shut down last week. He also pressed the unification minister to resign. Let's turn to Shin Se-min for details.
Reopening the Kaesong Industrial Complex. That's the promise made by the main opposition Minju Party of Korea's floor leader Lee Jong-gul during his address to the National Assembly on Wednesday.
It was hoped the jointly run Kaesong Industrial Complex could breathe new life into the Korean economy, which had been struggling to find new growth engines. And I vowed to revive the park by enacting a special law.
Lee also promised to restore dialogue and strengthen ties between the two Koreas once the party brings about a sweeping victory in an upcoming general elections in April. Criticizing the Park administration's handling of North Korea issues, Lee called for a full-scale reorganization on the foreign affairs, security, and unification fronts. He also called on Unification Minister Hong Young-pyo to step down. Hong has been under fire for claiming that 70% of the wages made by the North Korean workers at the Inter-Korean complex were used to fund the regime's weapons development programs, and backtracking that claim a day after, saying that he did not have the evidence to back up. The opposition party floor leader also called for bipartisan cooperation amid the ongoing security crisis and urged the related ministries to carefully consider the matter of deploying the U.S. missile defense system known as THAAD. Lee added that South Korea has been able to maintain peace and prosperity without the defense program and said national security should be the main consideration in deployment of such an advanced system. Speaking to the members of the assembly, Lee also urged that his party is seeking for ruling Saenuri Party's cooperation in passing a series of contentious bills. But the odds of that narrow considerably as the ruling party criticized Lee's remarks, saying that it is politically motivated ahead of the April's general elections. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Staying with local politics, South Korea's ruling party is outpacing its main opposition party counterpart in candidate registration for an upcoming general election on April 13th. According to the party's candidate nomination committees, 829 candidates have registered for the ruling Saenuri Party, 371 for the main opposition Minju Party. Saenuri Party Chairman Kim Moo-sung said the numbers are a sign of support for the party's platform of reviving the economy and improving people's livelihoods through reform. The Minju Party's registration committee attributed the outcome to the recent formation of the minor opposition People's Party, which it said had split the count on the liberal side. The Korean won fell sharply against the U.S. dollar today. The local currency closed at over 1,227 won against the greenback, the lowest level in 5 years and 7 months. This comes after rising speculation that the country's central bank will cut interest rates down the line after one of 7 board members called for a reduction at a monetary meeting a day earlier. On top of that, the stronger dollar comes on the back of investors' appetite for safer assets, as a deal to freeze, not cut, oil production led to a drop in global oil prices. On the local bourse, Korean stocks ended lower, with the benchmark Kospi shedding over 0.2%. And now let's turn our focus to rising tensions in the South China Sea. Beijing continues to shake up the hornet's nest, this time by deploying anti-aircraft missiles. This comes amid U.S. President Barack Obama and the heads of ASEAN, or the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, calling on China to stop such acts. Our Park Ji-won brings us this report.
China has deployed anti-aircraft missiles to one of the disputed islands in the South China Sea, raising tensions in the region. CNN reported Wednesday that the deployment of 2 batteries of 8 missile launchers and the radar system had been confirmed by the Taiwanese government and senior U.S. military officials. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi did not deny the deployment but sought to downplay the reports.
We believe that this is an attempt by certain Western media outlets to create news stories.
The move comes as U.S. President Barack Obama on Tuesday called on China to stop pressing its claims to the disputed islands. Concluding a 2-day summit in California with the leaders of all 10 ASEAN member states, Obama said there's a need to cool tensions in the South China Sea by resolving their territorial disputes.
We discussed the need for tangible steps in the South China Sea to lower tensions, including a halt to further reclamation, new construction, and militarization of disputed areas.
Saying freedom of navigation must be assured to all countries, Obama stressed that maritime disputes should be resolved through the application of international law.
We will continue to help our allies and partners strengthen their maritime capabilities, and we discussed how any disputes between claimants in the region must be resolved peacefully through legal means, such as the upcoming arbitration ruling under the UN Convention of the Law of the Seas, which the parties are obligated to respect and abide by.
The ongoing territorial disputes date back to the end of World War II, when the 1951 San Francisco Treaty failed to stipulate possession of the Spratly Islands. The islands are made up of hundreds of islets and coral reefs spread across hundreds of thousands of square kilometers and are a potential goldmine of oil and natural gas. Several ASEAN nations, including Malaysia, Brunei, Vietnam, and the Philippines, have also laid claim to islands and surrounding waters in the region. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
That's it from us for this hour. Thank you for watching.